That was, let me see, when was that? Almost 30 years ago.
Almost 30 years ago?
Yes.
God.
I entered HKUST as a UG student in 1993. There are a lot of noticeable differences, I think. The first thing that has changed a lot is the campus, right? Back then, for example, 29 years ago when I first entered, it was 1993, there wasn't LSK, there wasn't CYT, all of these buildings were not there. In fact, we did not even have lift 31, 32 at that time. So the campus was still the same size, but there were substantially less building. And there were a lot more open space, right? Much fewer students at that time. That's the obvious changes over the years. The university has gone a long way. The campus community was also less diverse at that time. The majority of the students are local, mostly Hong Kong. I myself, for example, when I was studying in UST, one of my favorite subjects was about the Chinese Cultural Revolution. Back then in UST, in the undergraduate program, we have a rule which is somewhat different from today's system. One part of the curriculum requires every student must take 2 courses from each of the other school. So at that time, there was no common core. But the so-called common core requirement was everybody must take 2 courses from each of the other school other than your major. So for me, I have to take 2 courses from engineering, 2 courses from science, and 2 courses from humanities and social science. And so one of the courses I took was about Cultural Revolution in China, which was very interesting. Since then, I've liked that entire history. I study a lot of books and learn more about all sorts of why all those kind of crazy things could happen, and I think that helps a lot. Okay, so that's my view. I think it's essential, and in fact, I would encourage anybody, regardless of how good you are in science and math or STEM, should always make sure that you spend enough amount of time in these subjects. I think that's important because it makes a person complete. Round. Okay, who is the person you are most grateful to, except for mentors? There are many people that I'm grateful to, right? First of all, obviously, I have to be grateful to my parents. One thing that I particularly appreciate is the fact that they really allow me to make decisions on my own. They were not that educated themselves. They basically provided for my education through their hard-earned money, but at the same time, they don't really dictate. They really wanted me to be a medical doctor when I was in the secondary school, but I have hated that a lot when I was younger. Now I like medical doctor a lot, actually. Now, if I were to choose to study now, I would go and study medicine when I'm at this age. But when I was 20 years old, I didn't like it, right? So people change over time. But my parents did not really influence me in any way, right? They just let me choose whatever I liked. And that's very, very positive and supportive. Now, of course, in my career, there are many people who have helped me. Here you said except for mentors, but I really have to thank my mentors, right? Because I have a couple of supervisors or collaborators who have really taught me a lot. One thing that we all need to know is that being a professor, it doesn't necessarily mean that we are already good enough or know a lot about the subject that we do. Actually, this is not true. Being a professor, being a PhD, is pretty much just the beginning of a journey to knowledge acquisition and development. And in that entire process, we still have a lot to learn. About how other people, how other research is produced. And in that process, there were a lot of collaborators where I have worked with, and they have really taught me a lot, right? This is the way how I became better in my own research. I'm the kind of professor who is a bit unconventional, I think. My advice to students are often very different from others, in the sense that I'm never an advocate for planning, okay? Unlike many other people who often tell the students you have to chart a plan very early in your life, make sure you know what you want to achieve at a certain age, where you want to go. I don't believe in that because I have never made a plan for myself. My belief is whenever you are in a certain role, in a certain position, you just have to make sure that you do that well. The moment you deliver your work well, the moment you can show other people that you are doing your job and you are doing your job with quality, then the next step will naturally come. You don't really have to seek out for it. The main hobby that I had, at least in the old day, was to play games like bridge. I play bridge a lot, contract bridge. In fact, before I became a professor, when I was a student, my ambition at that time was to become a professional bridge player. I even dreamed of competing in world level competitions. But of course, along the way, I started to find it difficult to balance the time because it's a game that requires a lot of commitment and time. And increasingly, when I was doing my doctoral study and gradually became a professor, the two really are not easy to coexist, right? That's why eventually I'm gradually playing less and less of that. But I still like the game a lot. When I was a student in university, there was no peer pressure. You know why? Because most of the students, first of all, as I mentioned, most students came from local families, right? Many of us at that time were pretty narrow in our scope. We studied in a secondary school. We haven't really traveled around. We did not get a chance to see other countries and students and systems and things like that. So as a result, the majority of the students who enter a university like UST at that time, our major wish was to make sure that we don't get kicked out. We worry about failing. We know that the university aggregates all the top students from different schools. So as a result, no one will think that we are the best. And everybody will just come in with the expectation to see other very brilliant, bright students. And our major worry at that time was not to become the last, right? Was to make sure that we don't get kicked out. So as a result, nobody would desire an A at that time. Because getting an A is supposedly the top of the class. Now, what makes you think you should be top of the class, better than other people, when there are these other 200 secondary schools top students in the same class as you, right? So nobody would dream of that. And as a result, there is no peer pressure, basically. Because getting a C is almost like, oh, it's okay. These people are smarter, of course. Why not?
Wow.
That's the old day. And I think that's actually a good culture. Everybody study because they wanted to study, not because they want to get an A, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think that's something that we should really start to appreciate. Study is for the purpose of fun, learn, rather than grade. It may sound good to many students to be a professor, but when you are into the PhD track, you will soon realize that many people are not suitable for doing it. Because especially in the business school, very often we don't really solve a well-known problem that are outstanding, that everybody knows is a challenge that you need to solve. In the business school, very often we have to find the problem ourselves to identify some issue that other people may not see, and then we have to motivate, justify why this is an important problem, and then we find solution to it. This process is not something that everybody likes. I study cybersecurity from the policy and economic angle, and this is partly because I'm coming from a business background. Although my major or my profession is information systems, but still at the end of the day, we are focusing on the business side of it. So I don't really develop the technical aspect of a security solution or attack tools or things like that. But what I find missing in the security analysis, at least in the literature, a lot of people are not paying attention to that, is the economics and the people aspect of it behind these cybersecurity situations. And that's where I'm coming from. I want to analyze security not from a technical angle. If you talk to people about cybersecurity, most people will emphasize, you have to make sure that you have the right protection tool. You have to encrypt your passwords. You have to put in place a firewall and a intrusion detection system, and all of these typical things that in engineering, in computer science, for example, they will teach us. But what we observe in the real world is that even if an organization has put in all of these things, breach occurs every day, right? There are a lot of scams every day today that we hear from newspaper, and yet every day there were students or elderly who are scammed of their money. In fact, recently in UST, I'm pretty sure all of you have received some emails asking you to be careful. about these telephone scams. Now the question is, why would people still fall prey into these attacks? And I think it's not something that we can answer simply using technical solution. We need to understand what makes the attackers and the defendants' decisions, what affects their decision, and how can we design a system, economic solution that can make people more aware about these security issues. And that's why I'm keen to develop it, and that's basically driving my research, right? All of my recent work on cybersecurity are mostly about policy and designs, and that's where I'm coming from.
So what's the approach when you're doing this? Just like using some applied econometrics or statistical tools?
Usually it's two aspects. It's either theory. We build theory, and when we build theory, we use some models, right? We adopt some foundational economic framework like utility maximization or rational choice. These are the foundational principles that are guiding our model. But then when we build our model, we try to put in the contextual element about cybersecurity. And then we will formulate the decisions of the players, including the hackers, the companies that are offering the systems, and the individual user within the company. And then we leverage the economic theory like utility maximization and rational choice to study or analyze how these people strategically interact with each other. And then how can actually an organization impose a different policy to shape the security outcome. That's the theory part. Now, on top of theory, of course, we have to make sure that what we do is realistic and empirically relevant. So part of my research would also study the actual data. So we look at, for example, after a country has enforced security law, does it really make the country safer? And if it does, what is the reason? What are the benefits, source, and things like that?
So what are the wrinkles and challenges when you are doing this research?
The main problem is that the data is not available, right? It's difficult for us to actually observe who are attacked or who are attacking people. Actually, one major problem in cybersecurity research that worldwide everybody is facing is that you can never identify an attacker, right? Because on the internet, you cannot really trace people. You can't really know who is making the attack. No hacker will use their real computer to do it. So as a result, whatever we observe, very often the evidence we have are indirect. All right, we can only make an assumption connecting what we observe in the security breach and outcome to the attacker behind. But we can never directly observe them, and that is an issue. That is a major challenge. So even in my own research, we have to make a lot of these assumptions. That what we observe in the outcome, the breaches that we have, they are produced by the hackers, and the hackers were producing these effects because of certain behavior. But then these are largely some assumptions that we make.
Yeah.
Can we really prove them? I think it's challenging. Yes or no, I often joke with my students that I'm quite open in terms of letting people know about my personal information. If you just give me a small gift, I'll be happy to tell you everything about me. But there are different people in the world, right? Some people are extremely sensitive about personal information. So there is no straightforward answer to this. It suffices to say that people are heterogeneous. There are different preferences. So there is no fixed solution to privacy that can protect everybody. Technology and management are naturally complementary because technology provides the infrastructure, the skill, the tool, the technique that we need to move the society forward, right? Many of these technologies are playing a great role today, including things like AI and analytics and so on, right? Even in the more conventional engineering world, like buildings, civil engineering, and things like that, they will need to be coordinated and managed. And that's why management and technology is a natural complementary subject that can help each other. And I thought that would be a very nice program to work for, especially when you see a lot of talented students who have the passion for both picking up the hardcore technology knowledge and skills, and at the same time they are keen to develop their management ability, so that they are not only the people who can practice those technology, but rather they can also think about how to design and configure. And that's what the management role can provide.